Hello students, good morning. In previous classes we have studied about physical and chemical change. Today we are just going to discuss that in a summarized way. Now we have studied that matter undergoes two types of changes, physical and chemical change, right? So we have discussed about physical changes and chemical changes. See here, physical change means what? It involves change in physical properties such as size, shape and density, or changes in phase without undergoing a change in the composition of the substance. Like physical changes occur when objects or substances undergo a change that does not change their chemical composition, where no new substances are formed. Now the second point is what? The physical change is reversible. For example, if you dissolve salt in water, now that salt which is dissolved in water can be recovered by allowing the water to evaporate. A physical change involves a change in physical properties. For example, examples of physical properties include melting, then transition to a gas, of strength, change of durability, changes to crystal form, shape, size, color, volume and density, tearing of paper into small pieces. It is also an example of physical change. Blowing of a balloon, here also the size or shape of balloon may changes, but its composition remains same and no new substances are formed. That is why this is also an example of physical change. Then what is chemical change? Chemical change. In chemical change, matter undergoes change in its composition or structure. Now here new substances are formed that have different properties and composition from the original material. Like if you burn coal, then when coal burns, coal have different properties. Then when once coal burnt, then whatever the substances are formed, that substances have different properties. So the original material and the material which is formed after burning, both are different. So in that case, new substances are formed and chemical change occurs. Chemical change occurs when a substance combines with another to form a new substance. Now these changes are irreversible, means you cannot reverse back the whole process. If you burn coal, if you burn coal and whatever the substance formed, you cannot get that coal, means you cannot get the original material, right? So that is why changes are irreversible. Then how you can identify that these changes are chemical change? If you found out that if in any reaction color is changing, then we call that change chemical change. Then if a formation of a solid compound or precipitate occurs, then we call that also chemical change. Then release of a gas, means heat or energy if release, then we call it chemical change. Then absorption of heat if occurs, we call it chemical change. Now you see the example of chemical change. Rusting of iron. Here you can see that the color change, the color of pins change. So we call it chemical change. Then burning of paper. See ashes, if whenever you burn a paper, you get ashes. So these ashes have different properties than paper. So a new substances are formed and we call it chemical change. And you cannot get, can we turn back the ashes into paper? No, we cannot. So that is why it is a chemical change. Then ripening of fruits, curding of milk, you cannot get them back, right? If ripening of fruits, occur, then you cannot get that fruit back. Then curding of milk, you cannot get milk from curd. Now what we summarize, that physical change means change of matter from one form to another without changing its chemical composition. And in chemical change, what are these? Change that occurs when one or more substances change into entirely new substances with different properties. Physical changes are reversible and chemical changes are irreversible. Now, if I'll ask you about identify which of the two images show physical change and which shows chemical change, and explain your answer, what will be your answer? In first figure, that is in A figure, cutting wood is an example of physical change because no new substances are formed and the composition remains same even after cutting the small pieces of wood having same properties than the entire wood, right? So the composition remains same, that is why it is a physical change and no new substances are formed. But in second, in figure B, coal is burning. So once the burning over, then the new substances are formed, right? So that is why it is a chemical change, and heat is also released, so it is a, and you cannot get it back. This is irreversible change, so we call this chemical change. Now what is some of the terms which we are going to revise? You have already studied these terms in your lower classes, just revise these terms. What are dissolution? So the dissolution means it is a process in which a solid substance solubilizes in a given solvent, that is mass transfer from the solid surface to the liquid phase, right? Like whenever you dissolve sugar into water, that means solid substances solubilizes in water, right? So it transfer from the solid surface to the liquid phase. That means here in your book it has written that the process by which a solute gets dissolved in a solvent is called dissolution. How you're going to identify these two terms, solute and solvent? Solute means in sugar in water. What is solute and solvent here? Solute is sugar and solvent is water. One more, how you can identify this? The thing which is present in little amount, that is solute, and which is present in large amount, that is solvent. That means little amount which is present, sugar is present. So sugar is solute and solvent is water. What is evaporation? So evaporation is the process by which water changes from a liquid to a gas, to a gaseous form, liquid form to a gaseous form. We call that process evaporation. So the conversion of a liquid into vapor at any temperature below its boiling point is called evaporation. Now there are various factors in which this evaporation depends. The first factor is rise in temperature. So if you rise temperature, evaporation increase. Second, if you increase the surface area of the liquid, evaporation increases. Third one, if the dryness of the air increases, evaporation increases. And the fourth one, movement of air helps evaporation. Means if the weather is windy, that means your clothes will dry at faster rate. So in these four factors, evaporation depends. So here we conclude this chapter. Afterwards we are going to revise some more terms which is given in your books, and 2 or 3 videos will be there for completion of this chapter. So till then, you study well. Thank you.